One of the most important things we're learning early in Chicago Bears OTAs is not what's happening specifically at practice, but how the team is growing off the field.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lorin Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at Locked On Bears. You can like Locked On Bears on Facebook. Join the Locked On Bears Facebook group for even more Bears talk. And make sure you hit that subscribe button on the Locked On Bears YouTube channel to keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And we especially appreciate our everydayers that tune in 5 days a week. On the show today, we look at where this Bears team is growing off the field. I want to start with Tremaine Edmunds coming in at the linebacker position and showing remarkable leadership for a guy who's not only brand new to this team, but also only 25 years old. And we'll hear the way he talks about leadership and how impressive it is what he's been able to do so far. Then we'll talk about Chase Claypool and some of his development off the field and the way he's growing in now his first real offseason with the Chicago Bears and some of what Justin Fields is seeing from him, as well as the rest of the wide receiving core and just the difference that it makes not only like on the field having a guy like DJ Moore out there, but also just what it does for the wide receiver room as a whole and how even though Claypool is relatively new here and DJ Moore is brand new here, their presence is still accelerating how quickly these wide receivers can get on the same page with Fields and master this Bears offense. But I want to start with Tremaine Edmunds coming into this defense because I was particularly impressed with the way he's stepping up into a leadership void defensively. That just, this Bears team doesn't have a lot of experience on defense, doesn't have a ton of veterans. I don't believe there's a player under contract on defense right now that's over the age of 30. I think Eddie Jackson is getting closer to that, and he certainly is one of the more prominent, established leaders on this defense. But with Edmonds coming in from the Bills, stepping into this middle linebacker role on this defense, that's kind of the quarterback of the defense type spot, especially when you think about Chicago Bears middle linebackers. And I was particularly impressed, and it struck me, Tremaine Edmonds did a press conference this week, and he was asked about leadership and growing into that role. And I was impressed with his answer and just taken aback by it a little bit and really thought it signified like how well he's grown in his career, his early football career, and the type of leader the Bears now have in the middle of their defense.
Yeah, I think for me, man, it's just me. I'm being myself, you know what I mean? And, I've been fortunate enough to, go through this thing now. This is my 6th year. And, each year I'm continuing to learn about more and more, every year and every step. And I think that's what leadership is. I'm not the type of guy, you don't know everything, right? You got to learn from other guys. You got to, see different ways guys want to be led. Not particularly want to be led, but see different ways of how they learn. Some guys learn different from other guys. So part of being a leader is you have to see that, from your teammate. Maybe some guys, you got to get on them right there. Some guys, you got to get on them, one-on-one. Each guy's different. And, I'm not the type of leadership and saying it got to be my way every time because I don't think that's good leadership. Good leadership is being able to listen, being able to understand that, like, everybody's different. Everybody has different personalities. Everybody responds to stuff differently. And it's just about, at the end of the day, holding each other accountable, making it a safe place. Guys can let their personalities out. I tell guys every day, let your personality out, man, because that's what got you here. So there's no need to change up now. But, obviously everybody is dependent on one another out here. So at the same time, while I'm saying that stuff, everybody understands the responsibility it is to be great, to be a great defense, to be, to be top of the league. So it's just developing that every day, man, and meshing with one another and, building that chemistry that, every good team, every good defense has.
I didn't include the actual question he was asked to prompt that answer, and even without the question, that was almost 90 seconds straight of Tremaine Edmunds answering about leadership and what that looks like for him on this defense. And it's just like every aspect of that answer is like exactly what you want to hear articulated really well and clearly in a way that I don't feel like we've seen exactly from the middle linebacker position on this Bears defense in a while. And this is not to be like a shot at Roquan Smith by any means. And Roquan Smith seemed to be a fine leader of this Bears defense, but we never really heard him say it in that way, right? Never really laid out in such a clear, solid, consistent way of like, yes, this is what leadership is. This is what it looks like to me. This is what it means to me. Like, it's really been a minute since you've had that kind of like, oh, this guy gets it, and this guy is approaching it the right way, and you feel like, holy moly, like that can be a really stabilizing force that when you're, when there's adversity and the younger players are looking up for somebody to kind of be that stabilizing force, he's there. And he's only 25 years old. I mean, yes, he came into the league at like 19, so this is his 6th NFL season, so he's more experienced than your typical 25-year-old linebacker, but still, man, like that's some very fast growing up. That's some very fast maturing in the NFL and adjusting to the NFL game. And that's how you command the respect of players who might be older than you. Guys like Eddie Jackson, guys like Justin Jones, even some of these new defensive linemen are older than 25. I mean, yes, it's a young linebacker group, but certainly, he's not the oldest player on this defense. He's not the most experienced player on this defense, but he's clearly like paid attention to what good leadership looked like on the Buffalo Bills defense, right? He hasn't just been kind of going along just playing and not really paying attention to what the leaders are doing, but really taking that internally and being able to now apply that to a new team that's paying him a lot of money to be the leader of this Bears defense, or one of the leaders of this Bears defense. Because even he in another question mentioned Eddie Jackson still being a big leader of this defense, mentioned Justin Jones, and even Jaquan Brisker, he pointed out, showing some leadership in this defense. But we were kind of wondering where those voids might start to be filled, or how well leadership voids on this defense might start to be filled. And we're like half a week into OTA practices, and Tremaine Edmonds already seems like a guy who's got that pretty well figured out. You can't just step in and instantly command respect and leadership, but he's building that very, very quickly, and I think we should be very encouraged by the way he's endearing himself to this defense, to this locker room, and to this coaching staff. We should also be encouraged by the progress we're seeing on offense, particularly from the wide receivers. Like, yeah, we know that DJ Moore was going to come in and be very good, and we're seeing that already early and often at OTAs. But there is a little bit of a ripple effect here, and there also might be a new and improved Chase Claypool now getting an actual offseason to work in this instead of being thrown into the team halfway through the year via trade. So we'll look at his growth and kind of compare that to his past and how that should set expectations for this upcoming season in Chicago next on Locked On Bears. The Locked On Bears podcast is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And it's the #1 sportsbook because right now new customers can get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's $1,000 back to you in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. So you either win your bet and you get your money, or you lose your bet, but FanDuel gives you up to $1,000 back in bonus bets. Whether you're betting on the NBA Finals, almost certainly looking like Heat Nuggets at this stage of the process, whether you're betting on Stanley Cup Finals, which are approaching, Florida Panthers are in there officially now, and I think the other Dallas Stars are getting there soon, or the upcoming football season, Bears regular season record, win-loss total, where they finish in the NFC North, MVP odds for Justin Fields, Coach of the Year odds for Matt Eberflus, and so much more. There's no better place for all of your betting action than our friends at FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NFL and NBA. There's no getting around the disappointment that Chase Claypool was this past season, but I am willing to, I don't want to say give him a pass, but give him some benefit of the doubt for the amount of difficulty of being traded to a new team halfway through a season and being expected to pick it up and produce at a super high level. Also in an offense that was not otherwise producing in the passing game at a super high level. Like there are a number of, I don't want mitigating factors, almost feels like too much of an excuse for him, right? I don't want to, like, he was still disappointing. He still should have been better than he was. But the point is more like there's multiple reasons to believe that he can be better this season for a lot of, external factors about, how the team has continued to improve around him, and that, if Fields is better and has other better options and the passing game is better as a whole, Claypool should benefit from that. But there's also an aspect of this that is on Chase Claypool and how he approaches his work as a football player in this Bears offense, working with Justin Fields, et cetera, compared to some of what we've heard about Chase Claypool from his time in the past in Pittsburgh. But I want to start with something interesting that Justin Fields said, a specific wording that Justin Fields used to describe the difference with Chase Claypool so far at OTAs. There's one particular word, or I guess sort of phrase in here that might catch your ear.
From like a technical perspective, what are you focusing on right now? Like, what's the next step after that?
Really just, going through it quick, going through my progressions fast, just getting on the same page as the new guys, working Chase in more. Chase has improved tremendously just from last year, the end of last year to now. That's one thing I'm truly proud to say, just, seeing his work ethic, his attitude change. You can just see he's taking another step, so definitely excited for that. And we don't even have Mooney right now in practice, so once we get him back, it's gonna be awesome. So very excited for sure.
The key word there was attitude, and I think Fields said like attitude change, but like specifically like Fields' attitude. Talking about Claypool's attitude. Claypool coming in and improving and attitude change, and etc. It's like, wait a minute, attitude change. That would imply. I don't think Fields was there to he certainly was not intending to try and throw Claypool under the bus or try and say that, he was a malcontent last season or anything quite like that. But given Claypool's history that I want to get into briefly here, it's something we should pay attention to. I don't think it's just a little sort of, I don't want to say slip of the tongue from Fields or a poor choice of words from Fields. I think there's a certain level of intentionality here, and I want to be careful not to over speculate as a result of this. But this sort of attitude concept was a question or a question mark or an issue, maybe. It depends on how you want to define it, when he was a member of the Pittsburgh Steelers, particularly, earlier in his career. There was questions about his attitude. There was questions about his mentality. Not so much does he love football? Not questioning does he want to win, but there were definitely people questioning his commitment to the team. There were questions about potentially selfishness and wanting more his own sort of goals and production and caring about himself more so than the success of the offense and the success of the team as a whole. There was famously a play where they were running out of time at the end of a game there was 30 seconds left, and Chase Claypool caught a first down and then, set the ball down and pointed to signal the first down and took time to do that, to sort of celebrate the catch and the first down, rather than hurry up, get back to the line of scrimmage so they can clock the ball or spike the ball and stop the clock to get another play in. And there was a thought that his particular celebration there cost the Steelers an extra play's worth of time at the end of a critical game that they were trying to win, that they ultimately ended up losing. And there was also, some quotes occasionally from him where, I think there was a time when they lost to the Browns in the playoffs, and then Claypool kind of said that it wasn't a big deal that they lost because the Browns were just going to get destroyed by the Chiefs the next week, so it's all good, was kind of what he said. There were other times when he thought the team should make practice more fun by doing more music and warm up so players can be dancing and having fun, and all that was sort of. And I think some aspects of that are a little bit overblown and are a little bit too critical of Chase Claypool, and maybe, but some of it might have a little bit of legs. It kind of becomes this any individual thing, not a big deal, maybe, but collectively it becomes a bigger deal. I think former Steelers safety Ryan Clark on ESPN once called out Claypool. I think it was after that first down point situation where he called him mentally and emotionally underdeveloped, that he only cared about himself and said he was self-centered. Again, I think some of that criticism is too big of an assumption about Claypool. I don't think we really know that much about Chase Claypool, but it does then bring us back to Fields saying Claypool's attitude changed. To use that word attitude, to reference Claypool's attitude at all in his answer is what perks the ears there. And perhaps, there was a feeling like Claypool got thrown into the fire last season a little bit and was, drowning in trying to learn the offense and get up to speed, and that maybe he wasn't feeling super jazzed about losing 10 straight, the Bears losing their last 10 games of the season. And maybe, I think it'd be hard to keep a great attitude through a 10-game losing streak. I don't think he was here for all 10, but you get my point, right? The Bears did not win a game once Chase Claypool became a member of this team, if I'm remembering correctly. But maybe going through a whole offseason now and having a whole offseason in the offense to work with Fields and also, adding DJ Moore to boost the wide receiver core even more, I could see how that could make your attitude better too. So, I don't want to overblow this and say, Chase Claypool was a problem last year, but now his attitude is totally solved. No, but it is an interesting sort of phrasing from Fields. That's all I wanted to point out there, is that just something to keep an eye on, something to be like, that's an interesting way for him to phrase it. You wonder exactly why he phrased it and whether or not that's a good sign of more positive contributions from Claypool this season. I do think as much as DJ Moore is going to take snaps, targets, catches, yards away from Chase Claypool as far as the opportunity available to him, he is also going to be a net positive and overall make things better and easier for Claypool, better and easier for Darnell Mooney, and better and easier for Justin Fields. And I want to go into some of the more specifics of that ripple effect with Fields describing some of how what they're seeing now at OTAs with the wide receivers compares to what they were seeing last year with the wide receivers at OTAs, and how even though there are new players in Claypool and Moore, they can be on an even faster, accelerated developmental track there with talent like that at wide receiver. That's next on Locked On Bears. I've really felt like it's hard to overstate how big and important DJ Moore's acquisition is for this Bears offense. We've talked about it in a few different ways, and yet I still don't feel like we've been able to fully grasp the magnitude that adding a 1,000-yard number one wide receiver to an offense that was severely lacking one can do in so many more ways. Yes, 1,000 yards from a wide receiver is great, but it has such a multiplying effect. Ryan Poles loves to use that word, a multiplier. He's a multiplier. What he does also makes other players better, and so it sort of multiplies the impact beyond just one player, but a multiple group there. And even though DJ Moore's trying to pick up this offense brand new this offseason, and even though Chase Claypool wasn't even here last year at OTAs, so those guys have a lot to learn as far as how they do things and how things should be done and what Justin Fields prefers and all that stuff. I think there's a certain effect here of guys being way ahead of the game compared to last year because of the sort of established nature that they bring to the team. Here's Justin Fields' perspective on it.
Mike Tolbert said that this is a more established group of receivers.
Meaning established, meaning what?
DJ was number one. And, having guys like that who have more pronounced roles, and they're not trying to guess, hey, this guy might be a slot guy, this might be better, better on the outside. What does that do for you, having guys that are here now? You're not guessing, hey, I might be having.
I think it helps the receivers, if I'm honest. So, of course, DJ's number one. He's going to play the X, so instead of them having to move around, they can just focus on their position. Of course, they're going to have to know the whole concept and stuff like that, but it's going to be good for them, just, knowing their route, knowing their job, getting guys to do, to run certain routes and that they can get good at, so that they can practice at. So I think it's good for them, and it'll just be more consistent for them running the routes and, more consistent for me throwing to them. So, yeah.
So as part of that question, right, it included a little bit of a quote from the wide receivers coach, Tyke Tolbert, as well, where he said, and I think this all sort of ties together, that last year when you had that Bears wide receiving core that was, fairly pathetic, I would say. I mean, to try and put it gently, they were awful. Where you had Byron Pringle in free agency, Darnell Mooney back from the previous year, Velus Jones coming in as a rookie, Equanimeous St. Brown there. I think Daz Newsome was still a part of that, at OTAs last year. The Bears were still trying to figure out where everybody was going to play, right? Was Darnell Mooney going to be your all of the time lined up on the outside X wide receiver like Fields described for DJ Moore there? Was Darnell Mooney going to be primarily a slot guy? Was Byron Pringle going to be your primarily slot guy? Or how much were you going to rotate those guys? Who's going to be the other? Then, who's your number two wide receiver on the outside if Pringle or Mooney is in the slot? Is Velus Jones going to be a slot guy or an outside guy? Can Equanimeous St. Brown be moved around a little bit? And just who's your second best wide receiver and who's your third? What is that depth chart even going to look like in terms of your top three guys? So I think there was a lot of we'll try Mooney here and we'll try Equanimeous St. Brown here. We'll try Pringle here. and then we'll switch them up and try them in other spots and try and figure out which spot is going to be the best for each of these guys. This year, you're so much more established just in terms of the known quantities and skill sets that these wide receivers have, as opposed to last year, where, yes, DJ Moore is brand new, but as Fields was saying, he's the X, he's the number one wide receiver, mostly on the outside. You move him around, of course, like no one's like locked into one position and one position only, and they're still expected to know the other roles on the offense, but for the most part, DJ Moore is going to be that guy. We know Chase Claypool has been primarily like, he's the big 6'4", 220-plus pound, like outside vertical wide receiver. Certainly there's times you want to move the big vertical guy into the slot. Absolutely. But like he can be that other big outside receiver. And we saw last year, Darnell Mooney grew more and more into a slot role in this Bears offense. And he's going to be, I think the way you'll see it is like when you have two wide receivers on the field, it's Mooney and Moore on the outside. When you bring in a third wide receiver, Mooney moves into the slot most often, and then Claypool takes over on the outside. So Mooney is still your number 2 wide receiver, but plays in the slot, and Claypool comes in as your number 3, but plays more primarily outside. You don't have to figure out, hey, like, where should we play DJ Moore? I mean, the answer is kind of everywhere, but where should we primarily play DJ Moore? Yeah, he's pretty clearly the number 1 guy. Where should we pretty primarily play Chase Claypool? On the sideline. Let him use the sideline, let him be a vertical outside threat there. You don't have to try and question, like, well, do we need to try and make Claypool a slot receiver? Like, yeah, you can play, there are certain big slot roles, but he's going to be primarily an outside receiver. You can still sort of play the figuring it out game with the backups, of course, like Tyler Scott. Is he going to be, he didn't really play slot much at all in college, but they've been working him in the slot through rookie minicamps and OTAs. So, there's room for experimentation with some of the backup guys that then where it's not as critical then for Fields to be like crisp on the same page with slightly rotational wide receivers. Like that'll come, but it's not as important. So now, when Fields is running these plays, he can more consistently always know, okay, whenever we run this concept, it's always going to be DJ Moore here, it's always going to be Chase Claypool there, and it's always going to be Darnell Mooney in motion here. And I know how fast DJ Moore can run that route. I know how quickly Chase Claypool runs that route, and I know how long it takes Darnell Mooney to get from that position to that point on the field. And you can rep the same player in the same position on the same route over and over and over again, so Fields can really have that be like second hand, second nature, second knowledge to him, as opposed to last year where it's like, okay, I've got Equanimeous St. Brown in this spot, I've got Velus Jones in this spot, and Mooney in that spot, run the play. Next play, Dante Pettis is in that spot, Byron Pringle's in that spot, and maybe Daz Newsome is that spot. It's like, okay, well, wait, I know that Equanimeous St. Brown takes this long to get there, but Dante Pettis might take a little bit longer to get there or a little bit faster to get there, and trying to, it just adds more onto Justin Fields' plate of what he has to do as a quarterback, what his timing needs to be, and trying to get on the same page with, 5 or 6 different receivers rotating through there, as opposed to this year, you just really need to be on the same page with those 3 main wide receivers. Sure, other guys you also need to get there too, but like the most important thing is focus on those guys at wide receiver, and they've got stability there. Plus, then DJ Moore is going to command so much more attention in terms of safety shading over to his space, the best cornerbacks lining up with DJ Moore. So it should be then easier matchups for Chase Claypool and Darnell Mooney and Cole Kmet and the rest of the pass catchers in this offense to be more than individually efficient and perhaps overall productive as a result of Moore's addition into this team. And if it makes Fields better too, it makes everybody else better, and it makes the whole offense as a whole really, really grow. That's why DJ Moore is so important beyond just what he does individually, but just his presence, his stability, his established nature as a top-tier NFL wide receiver. It's really going to be fun to see how this wide receiving core comes together and what we get from Justin Fields this season. You can be sure we'll break it all down for you all offseason long right here on the Locked On Bears podcast. So make sure you hit that subscribe button on the Locked On Bears YouTube channel or wherever you listen to podcasts. That's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. On tomorrow's podcast, we will talk to Joe Marino from Locked On NFL Scouting to get more of an outsider's perspective on this Bears team. He watched the tape, he did his homework, he looked at it from more of an objective, more independent, there's no bias there, or there's no sort of preconceived notions that are shading his evaluations compared to like us who are talking about the Bears every single day. So I'm really, really looking forward to having Joe on the podcast tomorrow. So make sure you come on back. Listen to us again tomorrow and every day. Become a Locked On Bears everydayer if you aren't already, because every day you get another opportunity to bear down.